This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Solutions, the leading iGaming PAM platform with a modular approach, including many benefits like a fast, secure, and scalable API-based platform, integrated with all major third-party products and services. Make sure you head over to Pragmatic Solutions and join our smart thinking.
For the iGaming Next podcast live, please welcome to the stage the co-founder and managing director of iGaming Next, Pierre Lindh, and his very special guest, the director of Willow Park Capital, Gavin Hamilton. Please welcome them on. Thank you.
I don't think we had a surprise today. Feel free to have a seat, Gavin. I told you we had a surprise for you here today. How come? What's the love for this song come from? I had so many comments before in the preparation for this session that you have played this song on repeat at a previous conference. What's the background here?
It's kind of a long story. I don't know if anyone's ever seen Belfast. Anyway, there's a part where Jamie Dornan sings this, and Jamie Dornan's just gorgeous, a gorgeous Irish man like myself. So,
fantastic. So, Gavin Hamilton, I'm very excited to have you here today, of course. You're the former CEO of RedTiger, former COO of NetEnt, commercial director of Evolution, and now, of course, you started Willow Park Capital to start some interesting projects here. But I also know that you're a bit of a mystic in the industry. You're one of the guys that are really good at making predictions in the industry, and we like that here at iGaming Next, of course. And so, in the preparation for this podcast, you talked about the 5 predictions about the industry that you laid out in 2015 in a board meeting with your former company here. Can you first of all talk about what those 5 predictions were back in 2015?
yeah, sure. So I was telling Pierre that when Paddy Power Betfair merged, Brian asked us to present to the board about what the future of gambling would look like in 2020. And actually, on the board at the time was Peter Jackson, who's the now CEO. So I'm sure he still has the notes from the session. But I won't go into all 5. But two of the big ones that stuck out for me at the time were at the time, live casino was about 9-10% of Paddy Power's revenue, and it was only about 20% mobile at the time. And it seemed at the time that it was just inevitable that the live casino space would continue to grow. And as we sit here now and look back at it, it seems fairly self-evident. But at the time, there's this common consensus that it would never work on mobile. Nobody would ever sit there on a mobile device and play on a live dealer studio. And I think what was obvious at the time is mobile phone screens were getting larger, batteries were getting longer or faster to charge. You had better storage on devices, so large apps it wasn't just going to block up your whole storage on your device, and it just seemed inevitable that the whole live casino space was just going to explode. And I think the Evolution share price since then was a big thing. Yep. The growth of that kind of seems obvious now, but at the time you'd be surprised at how many people back then thought that live casino could never work on mobile, and it was only going to be desktop only. I don't even think Playtech offered mobile back then, or maybe just through iOS. The other thing that was really interesting back then was in 2013, Counter-Strike started their skin store, and that started this kind of cottage industry of skins betting, where people started betting for skins on online, and the games that they were playing on were games like the equivalent today of crash games, of dice games, and in around the same time and linked to it, you saw the emergence of the likes of Satoshi Dice or Prime Dice. And the point I was making to the board at the time is these customers, the most common game at the time was a 14 number roulette, right, which has like a 7% hold margin on it. And it's like, here's a group of customers who've never played in a land-based casino before, who are completely unaware, as like no customer. Like the big talk out of Vegas this year was how everything switched from Blackjack Play Streets 2, right, the sensitivity to margin, whereas here you had a huge cohort of players playing 14 number roulette and just received a different education as to gambling. And the question I was asking at the time was, what happens when these people grow up, these digital natives who've grown up through video gaming, grown up through streaming, familiar with Bitcoin, what does that look like in 2020? And I think the bit that I didn't see is how that all came together, because Prime Dice went on to become Stake.com, or it was the genesis of Stake.com, which is now the largest gambling industry in the world. And then you see the bleed over of video into streaming, and like let's say the fastest growing streaming platform is now owned by or partially backed by a gambling company. So all those trends have come together, right? And I think what you have is a new generation of gamblers that are very different to the generation of gamblers that existed back then, you know?
Right. We can call you Mr. Gavin from here on. Right. Great predictions back in those days, for sure. Also, Gavin, I mean, you've been in the industry for a long time, but not only have you been working in many different interesting organizations, but you've also been a part of some really big mergers and acquisitions throughout your career. You mentioned Paddy Power, obviously merging with Betfair, the acquisition of your own company, RedTiger, by NetEnt, and then NetEnt being acquired by Evolution. Some of these mergers and acquisitions have been more turbulent than others, let's say. But what have you learned through going through these massive mergers and acquisitions in your career?
What have I learned? It's an interesting thing. I think the challenging part, if I take the Paddy Power and Betfair and Evolution and NetEnt, when two public companies merge, is that period of uncertainty between the deal announcement and the closing. Because I think everyone sits there and tries to opine what they're going to do, rumors start to spread, uncertainty, you can't make any decisions, right? Like, actually, funnily enough, today in 2020 was when the Evolution deal was announced. So, and I remember it because it was my birthday. I remember,
birthday.
Yeah, thanks. And I remember sitting there, actually, I wasn't involved in the deal, so I only became aware of it on the day before it was announced. And I was sitting on the phone, I got a phone call from Therese Hillman, and she goes, "I have some news for you." And I was like, "Okay." And she goes, "NetEnt are being acquired by Evolution." And next of all, about 20 people came around the corner. "Happy birthday," with a big cake. And I remember looking at Nick and the guys just going,
No celebration.
So but the challenging part between that is the same happened in Paddy Power. A lot of speculation, a lot of uncertainty over people's jobs. You lose a lot of good people because the good people kind of see the writing on the wall and they kind of go, "I want to try something different."
Yeah.
So trying to keep everything stable. And it's an impossible thing to manage, and I think that uncertainty is a really challenging part. And then trying to manage the period post-acquisition when the plans are put into place. What you do learn very quickly is no matter how well prepared, and I'd say on the Evolution deal, for example, they're incredibly well prepared. They put a lot of thought into how they're going to execute their plan. But as soon as it happens, all the plans are worthless. Like, it's kind of like I was thinking about it. Like, it reminds you of the Putin invading Ukraine, you know. It's like, I thought they'd be welcoming us with flowers, you know. Suddenly they walk in saying, "We've all these plans," and most people are like, "I don't care about your plans," you know. We're not doing it. So
like Mike Tyson says, like everyone has a plan, I guess, until they get punched in the face.
Exactly.
Right?
So I think that's a really, and you learn very quickly that managers who are technically competent have a very good view of how to let's say run their functions. It's very difficult to gain experience into massive restructurings or massive reorganizations, and that has a big people impact, and that really slows things down, you know?
Yeah. So as you say here, in every merger acquisition, there's a plan, right? I remember I went through the Betson and BetSafe merger back in 2011, which was super chaotic. But they made a commitment very early that we're not going to let anyone go. So like they safeguarded, so everyone felt safe kind of from the beginning. But that was certainly not the case in the NetEnt and Evolution merger, for example. A lot of controversy, a lot of people on the NetEnt side being let go under some quite interesting circumstances. Like you were obviously on the NetEnt side at that time. Like how turbulent was it really? Because there's a lot of reports on this, but we haven't really heard like the inside how that period went on.
Yeah, it was certainly a stressful week, as you can imagine, right before Christmas as well. So it was absolutely chaotic. But if I stand back from it now and I kind of reflect on it, there's not a lot of decision. There's no right way to do that. So obviously, Evolution couldn't control the timetable, right? They didn't say it would be great if you could complete just before Christmas, so we could really ruin it for people. You know, it's like
it was COVID, it was Christmas.
Exactly right. So then you go into it and you say, well, what's the right thing to do? Do you wait? Go home, have your Christmas break. When you come back, we'll announce it later. So there's no easy way to do it, and I think the idea was to give people as much certainty as possible, so that to remove that uncertainty that lingered over the business. And the challenge when you try to do that is you probably go a bit too far because you don't have all the information. But could they have handled it better? I think that comes down to individual managers. Some managers handled it really well. I think if you go through the various functions, some people will say it was a really good experience. Some people will say it was handled really badly, right? And but do I think fundamentally they could have done it better? Yeah, around the edges, yeah. But like it was just a challenging situation to be in, you know.
Yeah, interesting. So taking a step back, obviously you were the CEO and one of the founding partners of RedTiger. You know, you made the exit there. It was a huge exit to NetEnt at that time. There was rumors as well that there was like a fight between NetEnt and Evolution who was going to acquire you at that time. Was that actually the case as well? Was there like were they like outbidding each other, or what happened? What happened there?
Yeah. All I can say, it was a competitive process. I think at the end,
you were a popular kid on the block.
At the end of it, I wasn't too popular at Evolution, which made it very amusing when they
realized when NetEnt acquired you, they realized that the fight is over. They have to acquire NetEnt now, I suppose.
It made our first conversation very awkward. Yeah.
Great stuff. And I mean, how does an exit like that change your life or perspective of life? Because you know you're on the way up, like you're building your company and you're kind of building towards something, towards a big plan. And when you make an exit, all of a sudden, you know, all the opportunities in the world opens up to just kind of sail into the sunset. Is it possible after making an exit to keep the same drive and motivation, do you think? Because we see this often, that like there's acquisitions and then kind of like product gets a little bit not...
Yeah, I tell you what will remotivate you, sitting in an Evolution management meeting with the likes of Sebastian, and you kind of
right.
I haven't made it yet. But no, I think certainly from a RedTiger perspective, you know, ideally, I would have liked to have gone on for longer. You know, I wouldn't have personally. It was obviously a decision across all the shareholders, but I felt at the time we were basically still neck and neck with Pragmatic, right? And we were still on a huge growth curve, and I think we had a lot more to go. But then when the business sold, I thought the NetEnt RedTiger combined project was very interesting, and I managed to get quite excited about what we could do together as a group, and we had a couple of very, you know, quick wins, and there was momentum there. And then when the Evolution thing happens, that's when you start to go, okay, well, now it's a different plan, and it certainly got hard, and maybe that was part of the decision why, you know, I decided to leave Evolution after only a year. I really liked my time in Evolution. I was interested in being exposed to the live dealer product, but I think, you know, when you go through a couple of them, it's hard to remotivate yourself and say, because then you're ultimately at that stage you're executing someone else's plan, and it's harder to be excited about it, you know.
So you went on to, so I saw you made a joke at some point that you're the only person to have left Evolution with a lower share price than when you started.
Yeah, it's quite the achievement.
What an achievement! I mean, that's
So it was. But obviously, the expectation that was baked into the share price when we completed, I think the share price. When the deal was announced, so this day was 673 SEK, and then it went up to 1600 in the space of 8 months, and that was like price to perfection. That was like, you know, that we couldn't, and you're kind of looking at that going, there's a lot of hard work before we get there. And I think there was a dose of realism kind of arrived just around the time that I decided to leave, you know, because you had a business like RedTiger, which had a very well invested tech platform, but didn't have the distribution or the market reach that NetEnt would have had. You had NetEnt's platform, which wasn't, you know, it was a poor platform and was kind of acknowledged internally, but had the distribution, had the market reach. And then you had Evolution's platform, which was a live platform with the distribution to reach, but wasn't catered for slots. Trying to get that into something coherent, you know, it's a big project. It's not a small project, you know, and I think they're still suffering from the hangover of that today, you know.
Right. So now in 2023, I mean, we look at Evolution, and the live casino department is obviously doing extremely well, has always been accelerating for many, many years. And Evolution obviously is trying to grow the RNG segment as their kind of second vertical in the business. But in the last quarterly report, the RNG business of Evolution actually reported a decline in revenue. So like, with the proliferation on the slot side in the industry, now with AI tools like Midjourney and so on and so forth, that can kind of that democratizes kind of the production of slot machines to some extent. There's tens of thousands of games, hundreds of game studios. Is there any way, do you think, that Evolution will be able to kind of turn the ship around on the RNG segment and actually start growing in double digits as their as their goals are, and like how would they do that in such a difficult space?
Yeah, it's certainly a much more challenging slots market than it was when we started in RedTiger. Like I think I was looking at the numbers recently, and this year alone, 20% of all the slots ever made will get made this year alone, right? So it's like the number of games being made has just increased significantly. So the barriers to entry have decreased substantially. It's much cheaper to spin up an RGS. It's much cheaper to integrate an RGS. So competition is much wider. The cost of producing a game has come down significantly. But at the same time, the market has never been as consolidated. Like, so, you know, Pragmatic are 50-60% of some people's P&Ls. If you take the top three, it's probably 70-80%. So on one hand, you have more and more providers competing for the operator space, but on the other hand, a significant chunk of that is taken up by the top three. I think, do I believe Evolution can be successful in RNG? Well, I think the reality is, the kind of question is, do I believe Todd and his team has run out of ideas? And I don't think that's true. Do I think Nick Robinson just forgot how to make slot machine games? No, I don't think it's true. So fundamentally, I think what they have is an indigestion problem at the moment of a technical overhead, which I think they'll figure to solve. But having said that, even the way slot games work today is very different than when we started. Like, even the terminology that's used to describe slots, words have completely... When we used to talk about volatile games back in 2014, 2015, had a very different meaning to what a volatile slot means today. Now you have such a significant proportion of the revenue coming through people bypassing the base game and playing it in the true bonus buys and playing it in the bonus round, that is the primary enjoyment mechanism for many players. And even within that, there's a volatility spectrum, right? So it's like, all of this has been shaped by the fact that streamers have a big influence on how games are played. The players, as I said, have come from not from a land-based environment where there's certain physical constraints around how machines work. So I think the slots have become more complicated. It's just a much more different and complex environment than I'd say it was back in 2014, 2015. Like, if I go back to 2011, when I started in the M&A team in Paddy Power, and we acquired a slot studio called Cayetano. And we acquired them because at the time we only had 10 slot machine games on mobile. Right? So the idea was, imagine if you could get more than 10 slot machine games on mobile. No one even talks about mobile anymore. It's kind of just done, right? But that's how different the landscape back then. Just having a game on a mobile made you money.
Were you in the right time at the right place? Would you have succeeded with RedTiger today?
I do believe that, let's say, my generation, whatever way you want to phrase that, we are rode the wave of the mobile penetration into casino, and this has driven a lot of success for a lot of people. I think we're probably, as I said, that is done now, and I think there's a different audience, a different universe of players, and I think the way games will evolve over the next 5 years is going to be very different to the traditional slot machine games than we've been used to.
So we have hundreds of game studios today. What will happen in this environment? I mean, can they survive, do you think?
I don't think all of them will survive. Certainly not. I think
we saw Green Dead game going under a couple of months ago, for example.
And I think you'll see more of that. And I think you're also competing against a lot of the big operators taking studios in houses, like you saw Leo with Push, and obviously Kindred with Relax, and most of the big tier 1 operators have in-house studios at the moment. So the absolute amount of GGR to compete for is much lower. So I don't think it is sustainable that we'll have the same number. But having said that, because the barriers to entry are low, you'll always have small studios of 8 to 10 people spinning up, being able to do a few games. Just the ability to crack into that, let's say that level where you're above 5% market share, that's much harder than I think it was perhaps back when we started RedTiger.
So looking forward now, Gavin, you started Willow Park Capital, investment firm, and you invested in a number of companies. And what I find interesting when I speak to a lot of the employees within these companies is that they are it's like the Gavin Hamilton have shined like the Batman symbol in the sky and called back the old guard to come back and like kind of start the next generation companies here. You have like an incredible loyal base of employees that when you pick up the phone, they answer kind of thing. Is that a conscious strategy to kind of poach back a lot of the old guard?
I'm sure their version is very different. I think it's me following them around saying, can I give you money? Exactly. So I think it kind of happened more organically than that, insofar as a lot of people went through a similar journey, and then because of the changes, and this will happen now as we see more consolidation, just that the nature of these things is people get freed up from roles, really good people, and they're left standing there and they have ideas. And so I think I was lucky in my own timing insofar that there was a lot of good people that had, let's say, come unstuck from roles who were looking to do things that I'd managed to back a couple of them who are doing quite well. So I think it's like with all these things, with a lot of the businesses that you get involved in, it's so much of it is backing the team, and when you work with them, it's very easy to assess, how their strengths and their weaknesses and where you'll be able to help. So I think it's as much that when you've worked together, it's much easier to de-risk an investment. Going, I know exactly how this person will work, and I know how I can help.
Right. And so you're involved in a number of different companies here. Is there like a conscious strategy that you have in mind when you build your portfolio companies? I'll give you an example, like YOLO Group, there's our lead investor in iGaming Next. They are purposely building like a self-sustaining ecosystem that's supposed to help each other and so on and so forth. And is that something you aspire to as well, or are you looking more at individual opportunities and how they fit into your vision for the future?
Yeah, I'd say it's more the latter. I'd say it's more thematic than. Having said that, the industry is still relatively small enough that there's going to be overlaps, right? So, and there is expertise and knowledge shared between the various companies. But I think a lot of it has been driven by, we spoke about this before, but it's kind of like placing chips on the roulette table, going, this is where I think the next, the next opportunity is, and that's how we've approached it, rather than saying, here's synergies between the specific portfolio companies. They're all fairly standalone,
Yeah, fair enough. And the last question for you today, Gavin. So we started off by talking about the predictions that you made in 2015. We established here that you have some mystic capabilities here. So naturally, we would like to hear your 5 predictions for 2027. What is the industry going to look like at that time? What are the trends that are driving the industry, and how will that affect us in 2027?
Yeah, I've probably touched on some of it throughout the conversation, insofar as I still think we haven't this shift towards video, and mobile hasn't played out from a video perspective. I do believe what is hugely different. I remember being on the M&A team in Paddy's, and we would never invest in anything. We launched BetDash back in 2010, I think, and it was a social betting app, and it never went anywhere. We kind of utilizing the Facebook tools. But at the time, we had this mantra that social will never work because betting is a very individualistic thing. But actually, I think that's fundamentally changed. Like, you see people sharing wins, you see big win feeds on the kind of popular casinos now. You see the business that was backed by Tapcore in Australia, which is a social betting app. So I think the new generation of punters is getting far more comfortable with the social aspect of gambling and the casual aspect of it. And I think that there's still lots more interesting opportunities, like some of the things that Beyond Player, Live Spins, whatever, doing that. I think that's quite an interesting space. And I think we'll see some very interesting things evolve around that side. I think the second piece, obviously everyone talks about AI at the moment. I'm very skeptical that we'll see any material benefits from it in the next 5 years, as in.
Hot take.
I don't like. I think from my perspective, there will definitely be operational efficiencies. That's inevitable.
Not marginal.
Yeah, and possibly like significant operational efficiencies, but not to the extent where it upends the industry.
Right.
There's things I see. I was talking to a studio, actually, a game studio recently, who kind of invested heavily in the idea of being able to use AI for art and design. Right. The reality is art and design is only like 20% of the slots process, right? So, but anyway, a lot of the work that they did, then Adobe came out and said, here's this tool embedded in it, and it's now available to everyone. It's like, okay, well, we thought we had an edge, but now it's just, anyone can do this. So I think that is that is a long way to go. And I think what will be more interesting on the, let's say, the AI side is that private data is going to become much more important, right? So I think owning data for data's sake is going to be much more important, because as the models get smarter and you can train them on your own data, that's where it will start to unlock some interesting product opportunities. So we have an investment with a very interesting sports data business, which kind of is in this space. And I think that type of stuff on the data side is going to be more interesting as the infrastructure layer for what the models are capable of 5 years beyond that. And then, because we're running out of time, I'll say one more, which is I still think the payment side of it is still fairly broken. For casino, both regulated and non-regulated, it's still just generally payments is a pain point. And I do think that we will start to see spillover benefits of some of the innovation on the kind of crypto casino side around payments. I think it's inevitable that will start to happen in the regulated environment. Right. And some of the moves in the last few weeks around crypto, I think, are setting the platform for that to become, and I think it'll be amazing for the gambling industry, just because it just lends itself to one of the major pain points from a gambling perspective. So.
Right. Yeah, Tim Heath predicted this the other day as well, yesterday here on stage, that he thinks crypto will become an accepted payment method in the US in the regulated market.
I think it will. I think we're on that path. It's inevitable, and I think it will be very good for the industry when we get there.
Brilliant. We came with question marks. We have explanation marks. Thank you so much, Gavin. It's been an absolute pleasure. You're a legend of the industry. It's great to sit down with you here today. Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. Brilliant. Thank you, Gavin. That was great.